The Duke of Ravensmere did not bring his wife to court. He brought his pregnant mistress. That was the scandal. But it was not the crime. The crime would arrive later, wrapped in velvet, sealed in blue wax, and spoken aloud by the only woman in the palace who had been silent long enough to become dangerous. Duke Octavian Vale entered the Queen's winter court at precisely 3 o'clock, wearing black satin, silver embroidery, and the expression of a man who believed shame was something other people carried for him. On his left arm walked Miss Livia Harrow. She was young, golden-haired, and dressed in pale rose silk that made her look softer than fear should allow. One hand rested gently against her stomach. The other held the Duke's sleeve as if it were a lifeline, though anyone watching carefully could see that she was not leaning on him with affection. She was gripping him because she was terrified. The court saw only the shape of her condition. It saw only the insult, a pregnant mistress, presented openly, before nobles, before ministers, before the Queen's own ladies, before the Duke's lawful wife. For the Duchess of Ravensmere was already there. Lady Evangeline Vale stood near the west colonnade in a gown of deep pearl grey, without jewels except her wedding ring and a small sapphire pin at her throat. She had arrived half an hour early, spoken politely to the Queen's chamberlain, greeted 2 elderly countesses, and taken her place where everyone could see her and no one could pity her privately. That was her first act of war. She did not hide. When Octavian entered with Livia, every eye turned to Evangeline. People wanted spectacle. A wife's face is a ballroom's favourite battlefield. Would she pale? Would she cry? Would she flee? Would she hiss some sharp insult that would allow them to say later, with solemn satisfaction, that the Duchess had always lacked restraint? Evangeline did none of those things. She looked at her husband, then at the young woman beside him, then at the hand resting against Livia's stomach. And she smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, accurately. That frightened those who saw it. The Queen had not yet entered. The court was therefore still in the dangerous hour when people believed whispers belonged to them. Lady Cressida Thorne leaned toward her sister and murmured, "He has finally done it." Done what? Brought the child before the wife. It is monstrous. It is Ravensmere. A few feet away, Lord Mardell chuckled into his glove. Bold fellow. Horrid taste, but bold. Evangeline heard him. She did not turn. That was how Lord Mardell survived the first hour. Octavian guided Livia toward the centre of the court chamber, as if making a presentation of jewels. His mother, the Dowager Duchess of Ravensmere, stood near the dais, rigid with satisfaction. She had never liked Evangeline. Not because Evangeline had failed as Duchess, because she had succeeded quietly. The Dowager preferred women who depended on male approval. Evangeline depended on ledgers, memory, and restraint. Dangerous things. Octavian stopped 10 paces from his wife. Evangeline. She inclined her head. Your Grace. The title landed between them like frost. He stiffened. In private, she had once called him Octavian. In public, husband. In grief, nothing. Now, Your Grace, a title, not a bond. He recovered quickly. This is Miss Livia Harrow. I know who she is. Livia lowered her eyes. The younger woman was trembling. Evangeline noticed. Octavian did not. I have brought her openly, the Duke said, because there has been too much whispering. A small sound moved through the court. Too much whispering, as if the whispering were the offence. Not the conduct that fed it. Evangeline looked at him. How generous of you to relieve us. Several fans stopped moving. Octavian's jaw tightened. I intend to acknowledge the child. The court inhaled. There it was. The thing everyone had expected, and no one had expected him to say so plainly. The Dowager Duchess lifted her chin, triumphant. Livia's fingers tightened on his sleeve. Evangeline's expression did not change. Do you? Yes. Here. Yes. Before Her Majesty? If required. And before me. I thought it best that you hear it from my own mouth. Evangeline looked at the mistress again. Poor Livia Harrow, beautiful enough to be blamed, frightened enough to be useful, and foolish enough Perhaps to believe usefulness was protection. "No," Evangeline said softly. "You thought it best that everyone watch me hear it." The silence that followed was so complete that the scrape of a footman's shoe near the far door seemed indecent. Octavian's face darkened. "You will not make a scene." "No," she said. "You have already provided one," Livia whispered. "Your grace, please." It was unclear which grace she meant. That confusion was the first crack in Octavian's confidence. The Queen's Chamberlain entered then, and struck the floor with his staff. "Her Majesty, Queen Amara." Every person in the chamber bowed or curtsied as the Queen entered. Queen Amara was 62, silver-haired, and carried herself with the stillness of a blade kept in velvet. She had reigned long enough to know that scandal rarely arrives alone. It brings cousins, creditors, forged letters, and women who have been warned not to speak. Her Majesty took her place on the dais. Her eyes moved across the court, first to Octavian, then to Livia, then to Evangeline. There they rested, only for a moment, but enough. "Rise," the Queen said. The court rose. Octavian stepped forward. "Your Majesty." The Queen's gaze remained on Livia, Duke of Ravensmere. "I request permission to make a personal declaration before the court." The Queen leaned back slightly. "A personal declaration? At Winter Court?" "With your Majesty's indulgence." The Queen looked at Evangeline. "Does the Duchess of Ravensmere know the nature of this declaration?" Evangeline curtsied. "I believe I know what His Grace intends to say. I do not believe he knows what he intends to prove." A murmur, sharp, immediate. The Queen's eyes brightened. "Interesting." Octavian turned. "Evangeline." She did not look at him. The Queen lifted one hand. "Let him speak." Octavian faced the court. His voice was strong. He had practiced. "Before Her Majesty and this honourable court, I declare that Miss Livia Harrow carries a child of my blood. I intend to provide for the child publicly and to place the matter under royal awareness, so no malicious rumour may threaten either Miss Harrow or the innocent life she bears." Some women looked away. Some men nodded with the approval of those who mistake confident wrongdoing for nobility. The Dowager Duchess closed her eyes, as if relieved. Livia looked as though she might collapse. The Queen said nothing. Octavian continued. "As my marriage has produced no surviving heir, I consider it necessary to secure the future of Ravensmere." That was the second blow. Not mistress, not child, heir. He had brought Livia not merely to shame his wife, he had brought her as a living challenge to Evangeline's place. The court understood. So did the Queen. Evangeline lowered her eyes for the first time. Not in pain, in preparation. The Queen asked, "And what says the Duchess of Ravensmere?" Every head turned. Evangeline stepped forward. The small sapphire pin at her throat caught the light. She stopped beside Livia, not beside her husband. That alone disturbed the room. She looked at the younger woman. "Miss Harrow, did His Grace tell you why he wished this declaration made today?" Livia swallowed. "He said the child needed protection." "And did he tell you from whom?" Livia's eyes filled. "From you." The court shifted. Octavian's face hardened. Evangeline nodded once. "I thought so." She turned to the Queen. "Your Majesty, I request permission to ask 3 questions before this declaration is entered into any record." Octavian stepped forward. "This is absurd." The Queen looked at him. "Then 3 questions will not harm you." A few courtiers lowered their eyes to hide satisfaction. Evangeline faced Livia. "First question. Who arranged your gown?" Livia blinked. "My gown?" "Yes." The room seemed confused. That was useful. Suspense feeds best when the audience does not yet know which object is a weapon. Livia touched the rose silk. The Dowager Duchess sent it. The Dowager stiffened. Evangeline turned. "Second question. Who instructed you to place your hand over the child when entering?" Livia looked toward Octavian. He did not help her. Her voice dropped. "Lord Severin." The name moved through the court. Lord Severin Vale, Octavian's cousin. Charming, poor, ambitious, and always near the Ravensmere accounts. Octavian frowned. "Severin advised you," Livia whispered. He said the court must see. Evangeline nodded. Third question. The room held its breath. She looked at Livia gently now. Who is the real father of your child? The chamber went dead silent. Octavian stared at her. The dowager went pale. Livia's lips parted. No sound came. Evangeline turned slowly toward her husband. You paraded this woman before the court to claim a child you never questioned, because you believed humiliation would frighten me more than evidence. Octavian's voice was low. Be careful. No, Evangeline said. I have been careful for 9 years. She looked toward the chamber doors. Now I will be precise. At her signal, the doors opened. A physician entered. Beside him came a maid in a dark cloak, and behind them, white-faced and furious, Lord Severin Vale. The court understood before anyone spoke. The child was not the Duke's scandal. It was Lord Severin's trap. Lord Severin Vale entered the royal chamber like a man pushed onto a stage while still memorizing the wrong speech. His face was pale. His blonde hair, usually arranged with careless elegance, had been disturbed by haste. His gloves were missing. One cuff was unfastened. For a man like Severin, disorder was a confession before words began. He bowed to the Queen, too quickly. Then to the Dowager Duchess. Not to Evangeline. That too was noticed. Octavian turned on him. Severin, what is this? Severin straightened. I know no more than you, cousin. Evangeline smiled faintly. That is the first lie. Let us not waste the court's patience with small ones. The Queen's voice cut through the room. Duchess, proceed carefully. Evangeline curtsied. Always, Majesty. Lady Cressida whispered. She says that like a threat. She was correct. The physician stepped forward. He was old, compact, and severe, with silver spectacles and the expression of a man who had delivered too many children and listened to too many men explain women's bodies badly. Your Majesty, Evangeline said, may I present Dr. Holden Pierce, physician to Miss Harrow? Octavian frowned. Livia's physician is Dr. Cole. Livia looked down. Dr. Pierce said, I was Miss Harrow's first physician, Your Grace. First. Yes. Evangeline turned to Livia. Tell them why you stopped seeing him. Livia trembled. Severin spoke smoothly. This is cruel. Miss Harrow is clearly distressed. The Queen looked at him. Then you should not have helped bring her into a room full of courtiers. Severin closed his mouth. Livia whispered, I stopped because Lord Severin told me Dr. Pierce could not be trusted. Octavian stared. Severin told you. She nodded. He said the Duchess had paid him. Evangeline looked at Dr. Pierce. Doctor, what did you tell Miss Harrow when she came to you? Dr. Pierce adjusted his spectacles. I told her the likely dates did not match the Duke of Ravensmere. The words landed softly, then detonated. A wave of sound swept the chamber. Octavian stepped back. No. Livia began crying silently. The Dowager Duchess gripped her fan until the ivory bent. Dr. Pierce continued. I advised that she speak with His Grace honestly before any public claim was made. She did not return. Evangeline turned to Livia. Why? The younger woman's voice broke. Lord Severin said if I admitted uncertainty, the Duke would abandon me. Severin laughed once. This is ridiculous. A frightened woman's confusion is not evidence. Evangeline looked at the maid in the dark cloak. Then perhaps the maid's record will assist. The maid stepped forward. She was thin, brown-haired and plainly dressed. Her hands were rough from work. She kept her eyes lowered, not from shame but habit. Your name? The Queen asked. Mara Finch, Your Majesty. And your service? I was maid at the River House. Octavian looked confused. The house I provided for Livia. Yes, Your Grace. Evangeline asked, Mara, who visited Miss Harrow most often when His Grace was away. Mara's eyes flicked towards Severin. Silence answered before she did. Lord Severin Vale. Severin's face hardened. As any concerned family representative might. Mara continued. He came at night also. The room stilled. Evangeline lifted one hand slightly. No further detail. No vulgarity. Only enough. This was not that kind of story. The damage lay not in description, but in power, fear, and deception. Livia covered her face. Octavian looked as if he might be ill. Severin said sharply, "Servants exaggerate." Mara's eyes lifted. For the first time, she looked directly at him. "No, my lord, servants survive by noticing what gentlemen hope we will forget." The sentence struck the court hard enough that Lady Cressida's fan dropped shut. Evangeline asked, "Did Lord Severin give you instructions concerning letters?" "Yes, your grace." "What instructions?" "To bring Miss Harrow's letters to him first." Octavian's head turned. "Letters to whom?" Mara looked at Livia. "To her grace." The court moved again. Livia whispered, "I wrote to you." Evangeline's face softened almost imperceptibly. "I received the third." "The third?" "Yes." Livia closed her eyes. "I wrote 2 before." Severin had intercepted them. That truth entered the room without needing to be announced. Evangeline looked at Octavian. She tried to tell the truth before today. He did not answer. She continued, "You did not make truth safe enough to reach you." That struck him more deeply than accusation, because even now, in public ruin, it was exact. The Queen leaned forward. "Duchess, what is Lord Severin's motive?" Evangeline turned to Mr. Aldrin Thorne, the royal legal clerk, who had entered quietly with the physician. He carried a blue folder. "Your Majesty," he said, "Ravensmere has no legitimate heir." A murmur. Under the current entail, if the Duke dies without lawful issue, the title passes eventually through the male line. However, the unentailed lands, trust funds, and certain political appointments may be influenced by guardianship, acknowledgement, and household control. The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly." The clerk bowed. If His Grace publicly acknowledged Miss Harrow's child as his own before challenge, Lord Severin could position himself as guardian, advisor, and next male protector of the child's interests. Particularly if the Duchess were discredited as hostile, Evangeline added quietly. "And if I were painted as jealous enough to endanger a pregnant woman, I could be removed from household authority." Octavian looked at Severin. "You planned to use the child?" Severin's smile returned, thin as wire. "No, I planned to secure Ravensmere from your wife's cold hands." Evangeline said nothing. That was wise. Let a man speak long enough, and pride will often carry evidence where papers cannot. Severin turned toward Octavian. "You have no heir. You have a wife who gives you lectures instead of sons. You have debts you do not understand, and ministers who laugh behind your back. I did what you were too weak to do." Octavian's face changed. Not anger first, shame, then anger. Livia looked up through tears. "And me?" Severin glanced at her. That glance destroyed what remained of his beauty. "You were useful." The court recoiled. Not dramatically, but morally. Even men who had excused Octavian's conduct now understood Severin had crossed into something colder. Livia stood unsteadily. Evangeline moved toward her, but stopped short of touching until the younger woman nodded. Then the Duchess offered her arm. The court saw it. Wife and mistress standing together, not reconciled, not friends, but no longer arranged on opposite sides for male convenience. The Queen looked at Severin. "Did you know the child was yours?" Severin's mouth tightened. "I know nothing of the kind." Dr. Pierce spoke. "The dates strongly indicate it." "Dates are not proof," Severin snapped. Mara Finch reached into her cloak. "There is proof." Severin's face went white. The maid held out a small packet of letters tied with brown thread. Livia gasped softly. "I thought he burned them." Mara looked at her. "I changed the bundle, miss." Evangeline looked at the maid with something like admiration. Mara handed the packet to the royal clerk. He opened the first letter. The Queen said, "Read only what is necessary." He did, briefly, carefully. Without indecency, the letters showed affection from Severin, then fear, then control. They revealed that he knew Livia's condition before Octavian did. They revealed that he urged her to remain silent, then later instructed her to appear at court with the Duke. One line was enough to condemn him. Mr. Thorne read it. "The Duke will claim what I give him if we dress it as triumph." Silence. Absolute. Even the candles seemed to still. Octavian sank into the nearest chair, not from weakness, from recognition. He had been used because every flaw in him was visible. His vanity, his need to prove himself, his resentment of Evangeline's composure, his carelessness with Livia, his hunger for an heir without the discipline to become a father. Severin had not created his disgrace, he had steered it. Evangeline turned to her husband. "You see now?" He looked at her. The question could have been cruel. It was not. It was tired. "Yes," he said. It was not enough. But it was true. Severin lifted his chin. "You have no authority to detain me." The Queen smiled slightly. It was not comforting. "No, I have more than authority." She lifted her hand. The guards near the chamber doors stepped forward. "Lord Severin Vale, you will remain under royal supervision, pending full inquiry into fraud, coercion, theft of correspondence, and conspiracy to manipulate noble succession." Severin looked at Octavian. "Cousin." Octavian did not move. "Octavian." Still nothing. The guards took Severin away. The court watched him go. Not with shock now, with appetite. Society loves a fallen man more when it once praised him. When the doors closed, the Queen turned to Livia. "Miss Harrow." The young woman shook. "Yes, Majesty. You will not leave this palace tonight with any man who has used your fear for his advantage." Livia began to cry again. The Queen looked at Evangeline. "Duchess, what do you request?" Octavian looked up. He seemed to realize then that the Queen had not asked him. Evangeline answered. "Protection for Miss Harrow until legal matters are settled. A private inquiry into the Ravensmere accounts. Immediate freezing of any declaration concerning the child. And permission to remove myself from His Grace's household authority until I decide whether his apology, if he finds one worthy of the name, is anything more than panic." The court froze. Octavian stared at her. "Evangeline." She finally looked at him fully. "You paraded a frightened woman before the court to punish me with what you thought was your power." Her voice did not shake. "You will not now ask me to remain because you have discovered it was another man's." The Queen sat back. "Granted." The words struck harder than a gavel. Evangeline bowed. Livia lowered her head. Octavian remained seated among the ruins of his own performance. The court had come to witness a wife humiliated. Instead, it had watched her take custody of the truth. By nightfall, the palace had divided the scandal into versions. That is what courts do when truth becomes too large to swallow whole. In one version, the Duke had been deceived by a villainous cousin. In another, the mistress had been a temptress who became inconvenient. In a third, the Duchess had been ruthless enough to prepare the entire exposure in advance. The fourth version was the quietest. It was also the most dangerous. The Duchess had believed the mistress before she believed her husband. That was the version women repeated, not loudly, but carefully. In dressing rooms, in carriage shadows, in the corners of chapel galleries. Lady Evangeline did not return to Ravensmere House that night. She accepted the Queen's offer of apartments in the west wing of the palace. Not the grand rooms reserved for visiting princesses, but a quiet suite near the old library, where the windows looked over winter gardens and the doors closed properly. Livia Harrow was placed 2 corridors away, under the care of a palace matron, a physician, and Mara Finch, who refused to leave her. Octavian asked to see Evangeline 3 times. The first request came through a footman. She refused. The second came through his mother. She refused more quickly. The third came in his own hand. She read it, then placed it beside the fire without opening the seal. "Mrs. Caller." The palace matron attending her lifted a brow. "You will not read it, Your Grace." "No. May I ask why?" Evangeline looked at the unbroken seal. "Because tonight he is not writing to understand, he is writing to be relieved." The matron nodded once. Older women recognized that difference. The next morning, the official inquiry began. Not in the public court chamber, in the Queen's private council room. Present were the Queen, Evangeline, Octavian, Mr. Thorne, the legal clerk, Dr. Pierce, Mara Finch, the Dowager Duchess, and 2 ministers whose faces had been designed by years of pretending shock was beneath them. Livia was not required to attend. That was Evangeline's condition. "The woman has been displayed enough," she had said. The Queen agreed. Octavian entered last. He looked as though he had aged 10 years overnight. His coat was immaculate. His face was not. He bowed to the Queen, then to Evangeline. She did not lower her eyes. The inquiry began with the accounts. It always comes to accounts eventually. Romance may start a scandal. Money explains why it survived. Severin had accessed Ravensmere funds through private orders signed by Octavian. Some were legitimate. Some were careless. Some had been altered after the Duke signed them. Payments had been routed through Livia's household, then diverted. Octavian listened without interrupting. That was new. Evangeline noticed. She did not reward it. Mr. Thorne laid out a transfer connected to a nursery trust. The Queen looked at Octavian. "Did you read this before signing?" He swallowed. "No, Majesty." "And this?" "No." "And this?" "No." The Queen leaned back. How remarkable that gentlemen who inherit land from 7 generations cannot inherit the habit of reading before spending it. One minister coughed. The Dowager Duchess looked offended. Evangeline nearly smiled. Nearly. Then came the letters. Mara's preserved packet, Livia's intercepted letters, the forged instructions, the physician's warning, the false timeline Severin had created, the attempt to make Livia's condition match Octavian more publicly and more securely than truth allowed. At last, Mr. Thorne read the line again. "The Duke will claim what I give him, if we dress it as triumph." Octavian closed his eyes. The Queen looked at him. "Would you have?" He opened them. Everyone waited. This was the question. Not legal, moral. Would he have claimed the child because pride made him careless? A lesser man would have defended himself. A better man might not have created the situation. Octavian, who was neither lesser nor better yet, answered honestly. Yes. The word did not save him, but it stopped him from sinking further. The Dowager whispered, "Octavian." He looked at his mother. "I would have. I wanted an heir. I wanted Evangeline to be wounded. I wanted the court to see that I was still powerful where my marriage was cold." Evangeline's face did not move, but the room felt the words strike her. He continued, "I did not ask whether Livia was afraid because her fear served me. I did not ask whether the child was mine because certainty served me. I did not ask why Severin arranged so much because convenience served me." He looked at Evangeline. "I have lived surrounded by what served me and called it order." Silence. The Queen watched him carefully. Evangeline looked away first. Not because she weakened, because there are some truths a wife should not have to receive in public while people evaluate her reaction. The inquiry continued. Severin's guilt widened. He had debts. He had forged influence. He had intended. If the child were acknowledged and Evangeline removed from household authority, to control the child's trust and position himself as guardian in all but name. The child was not his only weapon. Livia was not his only target. Evangeline had been the obstacle. Octavian had been the door. By the end of the inquiry, the Queen ordered Severin formally detained pending trial. Ravensmere accounts were frozen under review. Livia's care was to be funded from Severin's seized assets where legally possible, and from Octavian's personal purse where not. Not the estate, not the trust. His purse. Evangeline insisted. Octavian agreed. The Dowager objected. Everyone ignored her. After the inquiry, Evangeline went to see Livia. The younger woman sat by the window in a plain blue gown borrowed from the palace wardrobe. Without rose silk, without courtly staging, without Severin's instructions and Octavian's claim, she looked painfully young. Mara sat sewing nearby. She rose when Evangeline entered. Livia tried to stand. Evangeline lifted one hand. "Do not." Livia sat again, ashamed. "I am sorry," she whispered. "For which part?" The question was not unkind. It was careful. Livia looked down. "For going with him. For believing Lord Severin. For entering the court. For letting them all see me." Evangeline sat opposite her. You did not let them see you. You were arranged. That does not make me innocent. No, Evangeline said, but guilt should be measured. Not thrown like mud, because a room enjoys dirt. Livia cried quietly. Mara stopped sewing. Evangeline continued. The child will be protected. Livia looked up. Even if Lord Severin is the father. Evangeline's jaw tightened slightly. The child did not conspire. That sentence seemed to enter Livia like warmth. She covered her face. Evangeline did not embrace her. Not because she lacked pity, because pity is not always what dignity requires. Instead, she placed a folded paper on the table. This grants you temporary protection under palace authority and prevents any man from removing you, your maid, or the child without inquiry. Livia touched it. Why are you doing this? Evangeline looked toward the window. Because if I allow them to make you the whole scandal, they will never learn to fear the real one. And what is the real one? Evangeline's voice softened. That men can arrange women into positions and then blame them for standing there. The trial of Lord Severin lasted 6 weeks. Court forgot nothing. That was inconvenient for him. Mara testified. Dr. Pierce testified. Mr. Thorne testified. Livia testified privately, with the Queen's protection. Evangeline testified publicly. Octavian did too. His testimony ruined several men's opinion of him and improved several women's, though not enough to matter yet. He admitted his vanity, his careless signing, his intention to humiliate his wife. He did not wrap confession in poetry. Evangeline, sitting at the side of the chamber, noticed that. Again, she did not reward it. Truth spoken late is still late. Severin was stripped of access to Ravensmere, removed from royal favour, and placed under legal penalty. His debts followed him like dogs, his friends vanished with admirable speed. The Dowager Duchess retired to her bathhouse and wrote letters no one answered. Livia gave birth in spring. A son. She named him Felix. Severin's paternity was established through evidence and acknowledgement under pressure of law. The child received protection, but no Ravensmere claim. Livia chose not to marry Severin, which scandalized people who had apparently learned nothing. Evangeline sent a cradle. Not silver, oak, strong, plain, carved with no crest. Livia wrote back, "Thank you for giving him something that belongs only to him." Evangeline kept the letter. Octavian returned to Ravensmere House alone. Not because Evangeline allowed him, because the house needed inventory, and he was required to assist. His rooms were moved, not by punishment, by order. The ducal apartments were sealed during the account review. He slept in the east guest chamber, where the bed was narrow and the mirror unforgiving. Evangeline remained at the palace for 2 months, then moved to her family's estate. When Octavian wrote, she read only the letters that contained facts, accounts corrected, rents restored, staff rehired, Severin's access removed, trust protection strengthened. Any letter with feeling in the first paragraph was returned unopened. He learned. Slowly. His first useful letter began. The North Farms were underpaid by £37. I have enclosed the correction and the names of those affected. She read that one twice. Not because it healed anything, because it was the first time he began with someone else's damage. Summer came. The Queen summoned them both to a private audience. Octavian arrived early. Evangeline arrived exactly on time. They stood before Queen Amara like two people connected by law and separated by knowledge. The Queen looked between them. Ravensmere is restored financially, Evangeline answered. Partially, Majesty, Octavian added. And under external review, until Her Grace is satisfied. The Queen's brows lifted. Her Grace? He bowed his head. Yes. Evangeline looked at him. Only briefly. The Queen saw. Of course she did. And the marriage? Her Majesty asked. No one answered at once. Octavian looked at Evangeline. She did not help him. He said, the marriage remains in law. Whether it remains in life is Her Grace's decision. The Queen smiled faintly. At last. A man who has located the proper jurisdiction. Evangeline's mouth moved. Almost. After the audience, Octavian walked beside her through the palace gallery. Not too close. He had learned distance, at least physically. I saw Felix, he said. Evangeline paused. You visited. With Livia's permission. And? He is small. All babies are. I was afraid I would hate him. She turned toward him. Did you? No. What did you feel? He looked through the gallery window. Shame. Relief. Sorrow. Gratitude that he was spared being made mine for the wrong reasons. It was a better answer than she expected. She disliked that. Growth can be inconvenient when one has arranged oneself around justified contempt. What does Livia need? She asked. Security. Quiet. Money that cannot be withdrawn by men who tire of conscience. Evangeline looked at him. And who told you that? No one. She studied him. Then nodded once. Good. In autumn, Evangeline returned to Ravensmere for 1 week. Not permanently. 1 week. She entered the house through the front door. No mistress, no court, no witnesses, except the servants, who had always been witnesses anyway. Octavian stood in the hall. He bowed. Your Grace. She looked around. The house smelled different. Less cigar smoke, more beeswax. The portrait of Severin that had hung in the west corridor was gone. In its place was a landscape of the north fields. A small thing, not small. She removed her gloves. Where are the ledgers? In the library. Good. They worked for 3 days. No sentiment, no reminiscence. At the end of the 3rd day, he placed one final document before her. What is this? A household authority revision. She opened it. Read. Fully. It granted her equal and independent authority over all household trusts, tenant relief, correspondence, and child or dependent protections connected to Ravensmere. It could not be revoked without her written consent. She looked up. You signed this? Yes. Before showing it to me? No. I read it first, then signed. That answer mattered more than the paper. She placed it down. And what do you expect in return? He inhaled slowly. Nothing. She waited. He added, I hope for the chance to continue proving that answer. Better. She folded the document. I will remain until Sunday. His eyes lifted. Only slightly. Thank you. Do not thank me as if it is forgiveness. No. It is supervision. Yes. But Sunday came, and she did not leave. Not that week. Not the next. No announcement was made. No reconciliation ball held. No public embrace staged for the court that had once watched them fall apart. Instead, there were ledgers, repairs, letters, silences that slowly became less armed. Once, in December, she found him in the nursery corridor, standing before a closed door. They had once prepared that room years ago, before their losses taught them to stop speaking of children aloud. He did not enter. She stood beside him. After a while, he said, I thought an heir would prove I had not failed. She looked at the door. And now? Now I think I wanted a child to repair a man. That is a heavy cradle. Yes, the honesty sat between them. Painful, clean. She did not take his hand, but she did not leave. At the next winter court, they attended together, not as a triumph, as a fact under observation. The chamber remembered. How could it not? A year earlier, Octavian had paraded a pregnant mistress before the court and expected his wife to break. Now he entered with Evangeline beside him and stopped before the queen. He bowed. Evangeline curtsied. Across the room, Livia Harrow stood near the west window with Mara Finch beside her and little Felix in the arms of a nurse. Not hidden, not displayed, present. Evangeline crossed the court first. People watched. She greeted Livia, then looked at the child. He looks well. Livia smiled. He is loud. That is often a sign of health, Mara said, and opinion. Evangeline almost laughed. Octavian approached more slowly. He bowed to Livia. She inclined her head. Your Grace, no affection, no fear. That was progress. Then the Queen entered. The court bowed. When Her Majesty rose from her chair later to greet a foreign ambassador, the room moved on. but those who remembered looked once toward Evangeline. She was not smiling, she was not triumphant, she simply stood, unbroken, and this time no one mistook silence for defeat. So let us leave them there, dear listener. Not in the moment the Duke paraded his pregnant mistress before the court. Not in the silence after his wife asked who the real father was. Not even when the cousin's letter revealed that the Duke would claim what another man had given him if dressed as triumph. Let us leave them 1 year later, in the same court, with the child protected, the mistress no longer a weapon, the cousin disgraced, and the wife no longer standing where others placed her. With Evangeline, who understood that the fastest way to silence a room is not to shout, but to ask the question everyone is afraid to answer. With Livia, who was used by powerful men and survived by telling the truth before their lies became her life. With Octavian, who learned that public shame is not the worst punishment. Being forced to see exactly how easily he became useful to another man is worse. And with little Felix, whose life began inside scandal but did not have to belong to it. If you have ever been blamed for a story someone else arranged around you, then you know Livia. If you have ever been expected to break in public so others could call your pain proof, then you know Evangeline. And if you have ever watched a proud man realize he was not the author of his triumph, but the fool inside another man's plan, then you know why that court never forgot the day the Duchess revealed who the real father was. Tell me, which moment stayed with you? The Duke entering with his pregnant mistress? The wife asking the third question? The maid revealing the letters? Or the line that exposed Severin's plan? The Duke will claim what I give him if we dress it as triumph. Draw your chair closer for the next story. The court has gone quiet. The child is safe. And somewhere behind another velvet curtain, a woman is waiting to ask the one question that will ruin every lie.